Good afternoon, Tim Ostendorf, baritone and innkeeper. And this is a little preface to the video you're about to watch about all the different versions of Mozart Come Scoglio from COSI FAN TUTTE. And I had done this yesterday, and it turned into quite a long video. And pretty much spent my whole day yesterday doing it, just so you know. And I posted it, and I actually got a few comments, a couple quick little comments. And so I thought, okay, that's fine. And then a friend of mine who lives in the States said that he tried to access it and it was blocked for SME content. So I didn't understand that, and I thought, well, there was a section where I included just an audio track of Renee Fleming singing that aria, and I thought, well, maybe because most of it, the rest of it's commentary and stuff like that, and it's not the full aria, it's just little snippets, and I thought, well, maybe that's the problem. And because some of my stuff does have copyrighted things, and I do appreciate YouTube for being vigilant about copyright laws and material and things like that, so I totally understand that, totally respect that. As a musician, I get it. And yet my videos aren't, it's not just a video of the audio, and someone might say, oh, I'll just click on that and I can have it for free instead of purchasing it. Mine is all about the witty commentary and all of that. So I think that's a little strange. So whatever. So I took the Renee Fleming bit out and re-edited it, reposted it. That took another whatever it took, and still getting the same message. So silly me, I looked up what SME is, and it's Sony Music Entertainment Corporation, and yada 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 yada. And so I thought, oh shoot, well now that kind of makes sense, I guess. And so then I guess I'm gonna have to re-edit it again and take out any ones that are specifically Sony. Luckily, of the 13 sopranos, only 2 of them specifically, well, one specific, yeah. One in particular was Sony, and that was the Eleanor Staber. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, and I don't remember how to pronounce it, if it's Staber or Staber. But anyway, I included that in my original video. Oh, and so if you're in Europe land or England or one of those non-US countries, apparently you can see it. But if you're in the States, you can't. So it's very strange. I can't quite figure it out. So once again, I appreciate it all, but really, come on, this is just a silly video for people. But so anyway, so that Eleanor Staber, and I'm sad that I'm not going to include that one because that was the only one in English with Roberta Peters and Richard Tucker, and it was from the Metropolitan Opera. But okay, fine. And then there's another one, which was really heartbreaking because it was Leontine Price. That's under the RCA label, which apparently is also under the Sony umbrella. And so that's kind of disappointing. But so instead of 13 sopranos, you'll get 11 sopranos. And hopefully I can edit it correctly and repost it again. And everyone will be happy. Thank you, YouTubers. And but anyway, so on to the video, and maybe I'll do something else, something that's not from Sony. And then I was thinking, well, geez, of all my billion videos, I think there's 55 of them, did I not ever do something from Sony? And I'm thinking, maybe I never did, because, of course, being Joan Sutherland fan, most of that stuff is on the Decca London label, and I have, I have other, like Errado and Virgin Classics and Philips, and the Nightingale, Edita Gruberova's own label, the Nightingale label, and Teldec and EMI, and so maybe I guess maybe I never did a Sony. So I'm sorry you're missing out on the Sonys. And I don't even know if I have to remove the RCA one, but I'm just gonna play it safe. But I did want to do a little Carol Van Ness, which I'd forgotten that I had, so I would have included that. But that's also the RCA label, so I'm not sure. Maybe I'll do a separate video and see if it gets kicked out. I don't know. I don't know. Good afternoon, Tim Ostendorf. Can't even pronounce my own name. Tim Ostendorf, baritone and innkeeper at the Inn at Crystal Lake in Eaton, New Hampshire. I always have to start off with a little plug for the inn that I own in Eaton. But today it's going to be all Mozart, and I'm going to see how far I can go without completely driving myself crazy, because I realized I don't think I've ever done anything from COSI fan tutte, which is I think is my favorite opera. If you had to hold a gun at my head and say what is your top 3, number 1 would pretty much always be COSI, then maybe Manon as number 2, and then maybe maybe Anna Bolena, depending on my mood, maybe Don Giovanni. I don't know, but definitely number one would almost always be Così fan tutte. And now, surprising because, of course, Joan Sutherland, my favorite, never sang the role. She did do a fair amount of Mozart. She did the Countess, of course. She did, flute. She did Pamina, the First Lady, and a few performances of Queen of the Night. She did Elettra in Idomeneo. She would have been wonderful in Lucio Sillo or Mitridate. What's that? The Aspasia. She would have been wonderful in that, where she could just kind of stand and sing, or park and bark. That would have been wonderful. All that fabulous coloratura would have been right up her alley. But instead, today it's going to be all things Così fan tutte, not all things, just one thing Così fan tutte, multiple times. And of course, what's the most fun aria in the first act is Come scoglio, like a rock. And so I have 13 different versions. These are the different full CDs I have of the opera. And then these are all different recital discs with just the aria, the big aria, Come scoglio, like a rock. It's one of my absolute favorite operas. I find it very emotional, very human. Some people think it's very silly, but I won't go into too many details about the plot because it is very silly. But the raw emotions, especially in Act 2, are just, to me, are some of the most realistic. I find Così fan tutte and Carousel, the musical's Carousel, the two of the most realistic of their oeuvre. But anyway, won't get into Carousel right now because it's all about Così. And so this is the first act aria. We're going to play the entire thing 13 times. No, we're not. Instead, I'm going to start off with the self-proclaimed Queen of Mozart, Hellen Kwon, who does all sorts of wonderful things on here and does various, from Figaro, she does the Countess and Cherubino and Susanna, things like that. But here she is. I'm going to play her so you can get a little feel for, most of you probably, if you're watching this, you probably know this aria, right? Well, this is the recitative that leads into the aria, and then I'm just going to play a little snippet of each of these sopranos and or mezzo-sopranos. Interesting, right? So here we are with Hellen Kwon to start us off.
Nostro cuore, nostro orecchio e nostri affetti. Non pieno voi per gli altri van, si cerca le nostre anime si dur. In tanta fede e per
Now, for those of you who do know this, she is being wooed by these two sisters are being wooed by the opposite boyfriend. The boyfriends have pretended like they've gone off to war. They come back disguised as Albanians, of course. Excuse me. And they're trying to woo the other's fiancé. And so sometimes there's some beautifully lovely phrases in that opening recitative, and sometimes they make it a little too beautiful. She's supposed to be like spurning them. She's in mock shock about these guys, and yet they're somewhat titillated as well. And so I've also read that the aria itself is sort of a mock presentation of one of those opera seria arias, and so there's lots of big wide leaps and things like that, and it's very over the top and very dramatic and all that sort of thing, but in a comical way. And so anyway, I find it interesting when they sing it a little too beautifully, because it's supposed to be silly and over the top. Like a rock. Immovable, immobile. And then wonderful high B flat, and then down the octave to a middle B flat, and the fermata is on the lower B flat. But you'll see some people do it a little differently each way, and I like it done a little different each way. You know what I'm saying? So who's up next? Let's see.
Come scoglio immoto resta contra I venti e la tempesta
And so next we have a mezzo-soprano who has been known to sing quite a few soprano roles. That's right, we have Cecilia Bartoli. Is it Bartoli or Bartoli? Usually the accent in Italian would be on the second to last syllable, but for some reason I think it's Bartoli, but maybe it's Bartoli. I can't remember. I should know, especially since she's been around quite a long time. Like, this is recorded in 1994. I didn't realize it was that long ago. And she does all the, she does both the Countess and Susanna. She does Zerlina and Elvira, and I know she's done a lot of all those roles on stage in COSI. I know she's done all three: Dorabella, Fiordiligi, and Despina. And that's one of those discussions you have in a lot of those opera discussion groups. Things like, what soprano has sung all the female leads in Rosenkavalier? And, a lot of them start off with Sophie and then eventually move to the Marschallin and maybe do Octavian in there, things like that. So a lot of Mozart lends itself to that, especially both soprano and the bass baritone roles. For example, that wouldn't be surprising in Don Giovanni for one singer in the course of his life to have sung Mazzetto and Leporello and Don Giovanni, or in Figaro to sing Figaro and the Count, and who's the gardener guy, and then the other guy, depending on, their bass baritone-ish, kind of all in the same realm of that. So I loves me my Mozart as a baritone, because I can do lots of different roles in all those things. But anyway, this is Cecilia Bartoli singing her version of Come Scoglio, and I love that mezzo quality she has adds a little richness and excitement. Loves me my Cecilia, and she's definitely gone outside of her mezzo world. She's even done things like Norma, which has caused quite a, I don't know if it was really a scandal, but quite a sensation, I guess, because it's very outside of her. And she doesn't have a very big voice as well, so that was a kind of a big deal. And who is up next? Perhaps a Slovakian soprano? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. And so next up we have my other favorite diva, besides Joan Sutherland, of course, Edita Gruberova, a Slovakian soprano who is still singing, and she's, 71, 72, something like that. And this was recorded not too long ago, so she was well into her late 60s, I guess, when this was recorded. I'd have to look up the date. I don't see it right on the case. I'd have to pull out the book. But anyway, not to everyone's taste, but I love her voice. I love her sound, perhaps a little bit past her prime to do this particular recording of all Mozart, but lots of it is still glorious. And she did do a film version of COSI in the role of Fiordiligi, and so she is lip syncing herself. But I think it's a wonderfully beautifully filmed film of COSI. So definitely seek that out. It's definitely of its time, done in the late 80s, I believe. But here's a little Edita Gruberova. And maybe not to everyone's taste, not necessarily her best recording, but the fact that she can still do it, I think, is pretty impressive. I wish she had a little more point to the sound in this particular recording. But who's up next? And next we have, I believe she's English, Amanda Roocroft. I don't know whatever happened to her. She doesn't seem, I don't know if this was done back in '94. And this was sort of her calling card for a while, if I remember correctly. She did this everywhere, and there's a DVD, a filmed live production of her doing Fiordiligi, and it's really quite wonderful. Beautiful costumes, and I think it's really stellar. And she has this great sort of hooded quality to her voice, as we say, kind of covered sound that really appeals to me. And she's one of the ones that I love the fact that the high B flat and then it goes down to the lower B flat, and there's a fermata on the lower B flat, and she actually she holds the high B flat just a little longer than a lot of the other ones does. She puts a kind of a little extra fermata on the one that doesn't have a fermata. I love that. And then there's these two little, after the fermata, there's these two little eighth notes that a lot of them will hold a little bit longer on the D C down to the B flat. And there's only one soprano that I remember that almost sings it in time after the fermata, if that makes sense. And you'll hear her in a little bit. So who is up? Next one's very exciting. You might have to indulge me. Might have to do a little extra on this next one. And so this next one is quite a surprise. I haven't listened to this in a while, and I may have to spend a little more time with this CD. It is the Greek soprano Agnes Baltsa, and I've always loved her sound. There's no messing around with her, and she does some quite amazing things on here. Mostly stuff that is normally sung by a soprano. And so she does some Maria Stuarda, she does this big scene from COSI, she does Lady Macbeth's two big scenes from Act 1, and then the big sleepwalking scene from Act 4. And then a big scene from Les Troyens by Berlioz. And so you're just going to have to indulge me because I have to play the whole recitative as well, because I find it exciting beyond belief. Would help if I queued up the right track, right? Just little details, Tim.
Sortite fuori da questo roco e non profani l'alito infausto degli infaminetti. Questo rapporto, questo rete e nostri affetti.
And so that there is no doubting that character as far as that. It's balls to the walls, Baltsa, Agnes Baltsa, balls to the walls. I mean, it's just there is no like soft caressing of the line. To me, it just fits that character perfectly. Like, don't mess with me. And so here is her opening bit after that glorious recit. Swoopy coming back off that high note, but like I said, I'm gonna have to listen to that whole CD later. I'd forgotten how wonderfully exciting her sound is. And so I have another surprise for a very different reason. And the next one is surprising to me in a different way because it is one of my favorite leader singers, the glorious Elly Ameling, a beautiful Dutch soprano. And so, not known for her opera roles, she did very, very few of them. And the fact that she has this wonderfully meaty sound for this, I think is just wonderful. It makes me wish she had done more opera, and specifically Mozart. I think this is a really quite fine vocalism from Miss Ameling. Right? Who would have thunk it? Just fantastic. Just wonderful. And so who's next? Maybe another soprano from Gruberova land, perhaps? And so next up is the glorious, beautiful Lucia Popp from the same country as my beloved Edita. Of course, she passed away much too young in her early 50s, but she's one of those wonderful sopranos that started off doing the high-flying stuff like Queen of the Night and then moved on to amazing Pamina. Susanna is one of her best roles. That wonderful recording with Thomas Allen and Sam Raimi, I think it is, and Kiri Kanawa, of course, and Frederica von Stade as Cherubino. But here she is. I don't know if she ever did this role, but this is from a whole 3D set of all different recordings, and just such a beautiful sound. I've always loved her voice, even if that high B is just a tad on the brittle side. And next up, a wonderful American soprano. Who could that be? And here we've moved on to Phyllis Curtin. I have a soft spot in my heart for her. She was the dean at the school, BU, when I was a student there. Studied with her out at Tanglewood. Just a wonderful American soprano. I've done various videos on her. This was from a live recital from 1968. Oh, the year I was born. That's right, I turned 50 this year. It's true. And so I'll tell you about that another time, because I have some kind of fun plans scheduled for my 50th, but save that for another time. But here is Phyllis Curtin, and I won't say this is one of her best recordings, but and she has kind of a funny thing that she does with her vowels. You may not be able to hear it in the opening of this, but nonetheless, here's the glorious American soprano Phyllis Curtin with her opening of Come Scoglio. Just hear that little tiny bit of those two eighth notes. That she's the only one after the fermata. She sings them in time. Most people which is kind of annoying. I like the fact that she sings it kind of as written, although I understand why most people do it the other way. So we'll just do a little tiny, just so you can hear that. I think that something about that just stuck out to me. And now we're going to move on to some full, complete studio recordings. And who will be the first? A soprano known for this role, did it quite a lot. Well, I'll talk about her in a moment, and then we'll talk about another soprano that had a little relation to Phyllis Curtin, who we just heard. And so from our first studio recording, not one of my favorite sopranos. I don't hate her or anything, but Elisabeth Schwarzkopf, and she was a kind of a celebrated Mozartian, or at least this role in particular, Fiordiligi, and the Countess, and of course her Marschallin, Strauss were some of her key roles that she was celebrated for. And like I said, it's just not my favorite sound. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the detachment of it. Maybe it's the Germanic quality of it. I'm not sure. But anyway, but the rest of the cast is fabulous, and she sounds quite good on this anyway. Christa Ludwig is the Dorabella. Let's see, Kraus, Alfredo Kraus is the tenor. So not a bad recording. Carl Böhm is conducting. So here we have little Betty Blackhead. That B flat was, whoo, it was a little spot on, but just and so there, Elisabeth Schwarzkopf, and we'll move on to somebody else. But I had to play her because she was in my lineup of stuff, right? Next up, we have the glorious New Zealand soprano Kiri Kanawa. She did this role quite a bit, if I remember correctly, and the other singers on here are not too bad either. Von Stade, Teresa Stratus is the Despina. Oh, and by the way, before I forget, Stratus is the Despina on the film version with Gruberova, and she steals that whole movie, by the way. And so anyway, here's a little Kiri Kanawa. A little too soft for my taste. And I like the tempo to be a little faster. I love that American English version. That's so lovely. Not bad on the low note either. I mean, it's just such a beautifully creamy sound. But I do wish the tempo were a little faster, and that she had a little more bite to it. It's a little too pretty. And but next up is a particularly fun version. And so, to finish up and round out the afternoon of COSI and this glorious aria, if you've made it this far, and this is I saved it for last because it's probably my favorite recording, and it has Felicity Lott and Marie McLaughlin and Lucia Popp and Jerry Hadley, and then Alessandro Corbelli, and then that a long French name that I can't, Gilles Cachanay. I'm just totally off on that. He's a bass. I mean, I don't know those names. But anyway, Jerry Hadley, of course, who passed away far too young who took his own life. But Felicity Lott has always been one of my faves. I don't think I've really mentioned her. She reminds me of someone like Yvonne Kenny, and it's that type of voice that I've used before where I say it's very completely and wholly feminine, and I always mean that as such a supreme compliment. There's a Mozart all aria disc that conducted by Jane Glover, which is just fabulous. And so anyway, Felicity Lott as with her version of Come Scoglio. And I have to mention, let me stop that for a second, and we'll start that over. I have to mention this is Charles Mackerras conducting, and this is, it came out a little while ago. See if I can find the date on this. But it was, it's of the newer types in that they allow some ornamentation and some appoggiatura. 1994, so it's still getting up there in age, but it's fun and exciting to hear it done a little differently with some ornamentation and appoggiatura where you don't normally hear it. You hear it in the recitative, but not always in the aria proper, where she just did one just at the very, very beginning, which like I said, you can hear the difference right off the bat. See what I mean? And it's an upper appoggiatura. I love that. So once again, a little different, and those upper appoggiaturas, come scoglio, instead of come scoglio or come scoglio, she does come scoglio. I love that. And so just a little different. And so I guess now we have to hear the whole rest of the aria, right? There's another appoggiatura. Ornament. That's what I'm talking about. Triplets. Love that. And so thank you for indulging me in all those other openings and the recits and just the first few phrases of the aria. I know it was a lot to get to. And then, of course, the best part is the rest of the aria. But what I really wanted to do was to pique your interest in a bunch of other sopranos and to see there's just so many amazing variations just in my little stack of 13 sopranos singing that aria. And so... sorry, this was quite a much lengthier than I anticipated, but I'm glad to be back and glad to be doing these videos again. And until next time, Tim Ostendorf, baritone and innkeeper from the Inn at Crystal Lake in Eaton, New Hampshire. That's www.innatcrystallake.com. And we'll see you next time. All right.